Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this COVIDSafe legal compliance session run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session focuses on the roadmaps and the operational obligations from a legal compliance point of view of what you need to know and follow. It builds upon the works and the webinars that we ran over the last few weeks. We will be running another one next week as well too, to start to bring some of these reporting and obligations that your community service agency needs to follow. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's have a look at the legal context and background around this. We are focusing on the roadmap rules. We're going to show you some checklists today around how and what to actually do, and also to try and make things simpler and easier for agencies to run your services and operations, and also look at some of the timelines and service mapping for your agencies. There are going to be some case studies that we're also going to use to show you what other agencies just like yours are actually doing to meet their legal compliance obligations and get things moving. And that's the important part that we're actually looking here on how and when to get things moving and when to actually look at running specific activities so you don't get any fines and you don't fall foul of specific issues wherever your roadmaps are based, whether it's the Queensland roadmap, Victorian roadmap, New South Wales or WA or the likes. We're seeing all these different roadmaps that are coming out, and agencies are going to us, well, when do we do things and how? So we're not going to, and I'm just going to I'll put this slide up. We're not going to be drawn into anti-vax discussions and the cases that are currently before courts and the likes around this stuff. We are going to look at however, on what are the current rules, how do these apply to your agencies, what are some of the things that your agency needs to look at, and when. So as always, you will get a set of resources coming out of the workplace session that we are running today. We've been running these sessions since February last year, since the start of the pandemic, and each week we give updates around specific legal changes that agencies need to know about. Now, by attending this webinar, you should get a better understanding of the COVID rules, improve your awareness of what the workplace HR rules are, and some of the resources, including these slides we make available, as well as this recording as well too. So you've got these active resources that are available to you, and they're also up to date. A few housekeeping items as well too. This webinar is being recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session. You can use the chat line to get questions answered as we go through it. We certainly encourage you to do that. As many of you know, we do work through those questions throughout the webinar as we're going through it in live, and also if we don't get it throughout the session, then we'll address those at the end during when we open up for question and answers. Of course, if you did want to go back and have a look at our previous webinars that we have run, you can go to our Gemba 360 YouTube channel as well too, which lists all of the past webinars and information on there. And you can click on the YouTube channels and you can actually see all of these past webinars, and here it is here for you to view as well. If you do have any questions around this, you can also email us or go to our Kaizen Synergy website, where you will find also the option to actually ask questions around this as well too. And here is a list of some of our clients that we provide services to around this for you as well too. Of course, all materials referred to during the webinar will be circulated to all registered attendees. And of course, there is this knowledge base that we are creating. And we've done this since February last year. So that way you get these active resources and you'll get the weekly updates to keep up to date about changes to COVID laws and regulations that you have. Of course, if you have any questions, you can email us. You can use our 1300 number, and also my mobile number has also been made available since February last year, so you can reach out to us in many of these channels as well. So just to put it into context, what we're going to show you today is how to look at the roadmaps. We're going to unpack those. We're going to look at the activities and compliance things that you need to look at just to make stuff easy for your agency. You're going to see some of the tools that people use and how they actually use it as well. We're going to work through some of the clear roadmaps and where they overlap. As I've mentioned, whether it's based in ACT or Queensland or Victoria, the likes, or WA, we're actually going to walk through some of these and actually look at the national plan that the premiers keep on talking about. That said, our law firm's background is that within this, and let me just hold it for 1 second. Someone's just mentioned that they don't have any audio. We're just going to reply to them on this and just say, please check your speakers. All right, and we've just flicked that back. So this being said, let's have a look. The COVID, essentially our works that our law firm has done has actually covered setting up COVID testing clinics, vaccination clinics, legal agreements for community service organizations, and at the moment, we're really being involved in the mandatory vaccinations positions that agencies are required to follow, be that in Victoria or New South Wales or the likes, and also looking at making it fair around what are the exemptions that those are followed through on. Equally, this includes things like policies for agencies in terms of their COVID vaccinations, and also looking at risk management plans. And that covers a whole lot of areas around religious groups, NDIS providers, aged care providers, health and community service agencies, food banks and the likes. We pretty much covered all of these agencies over the last 12 months. Now, in saying that, what we're looking at here is that the rules around COVID laws continually change from week to week. We're seeing that there is now pushing for ramping up of pushing for mandatory vaccinations in different states and territories. You will get access, if you don't already have access, to our legal compliance dashboard for a single seat, which gives you access to all the resources that we're going to show you today as well too. And we're going to unpack some of the roadmaps and show you what agencies are actually doing that works. And this is the important part around this. We're not just going to cover off the legal theory around this and issues that you need to be aware of. We're actually going to walk you through what agencies are actually doing that is working and continues to work around this. So some of the forms that we're going to talk about coming out of the roadmaps is to look at things like your COVIDSafe plans, looking at the roadmaps and the legal obligations. So each agency is legally required to have their COVIDSafe plan and what that means now with the roadmaps. We're going to look at WorkSafe forms and also things like assessment forms that your agency should be having as well too. Quite simply, we always like to put our recommendations at the front of our legal webinars that we run. And it's no different than what we said last week, but we are going to go down into some further detail around recommending that you look at your workplace policies, vaccination policies, because that is a big one with a lot of states at the moment having cases before their relevant courts in hearing where things are moving. And I'll provide some comment on where we see those cases moving to as well too. Now let's jump into it. Everyone's jumped in to this session because they're talking about the roadmaps. Now, when we talk off the roadmaps, and we're going to unpack some of these, and then we're going to look at exactly how agencies are managing this information. Essentially, the premiers in the different states and territories have mentioned around that their roadmaps refer back to the national plan. So this is the Australian government's initial roadmap. And this is causing a lot of confusion with everyone because they're saying, which roadmaps do we follow? And we have no idea where we get to. So essentially, we're going to unpack this for you. Right, so let's have a look. So it's essentially divided into different phases: phase A, phase B, phase C, phase D. And under each of these sections, there are big ticket items on what the Commonwealth Government is going to be responsible for and when things are actually going to be opened up. So where we then sit with this is that when we then look at, let's say, two of the other states' roadmaps, essentially what then comes from this here is the Victorian roadmaps and even Queensland roadmaps refer to the different phases. And each of these phases are essentially lined back to what the Commonwealth is actually providing directions on. And we can see that from here. So essentially what we've then looked at is where do these overlap and which are the different phases that we need to see. So essentially where, if we look at, for example, Victorian, we're going to unpack some of the other ones as well too, but we're going to work through these just to show you where the overlaps are. Under the National Plan, it refers to the National Plan Phase A. And if we go back, essentially we've got the National Plan Phase A listed here. If we go forwards, it refers to the National Plan Phase B. And again, we've got the National Plan Phase B. Now, each one of these essentially then aligns for the different sections of what your agency needs to look at, depending on where you're actually based as well. So what we then see is when we look at these, each agencies are asking, well, what do we do in these phases and when can we actually start to deliver services as we reach these different milestones? Now, one of the variables that we are seeing in each of these plans, and if I jump forward, let's say into the Queensland plan as well too, what we are seeing from here, and I'm just using this, some of these have already occurred, but essentially we're seeing the dates of when things are being staged. And if we look at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, we're seeing, for example, the Friday the 10th of September, and we're seeing that's passed now. But if I go back to the Victorian phase, then essentially we're seeing it listed as the 5th of November. And some of these dates now have in fact been pushed out simply because of the public health response that we're needing to see in Victoria. But essentially the phases of each of these sections are captured within this period. What is moving is essentially the dates that we're seeing across this. And the same thing can be seen for when we see, for example, New South Wales under their plans as well too, and their key requirements that they've got. And when we jump through to WA around this, we're seeing, again, specific dates being listed, but it all refers back to essentially the national plan. And this is something essentially that the various premiers, I'm going to say, and the state governments haven't been very clear in how this actually fits together. Now, when we look at this, a lot of agencies are saying to us, well, that's great, but where do we then fit in and how do we manage all our legal requirements that come out of this? And so what we've seen is a range of forms being used, and I'll come to each of these within our presentation shortly. But essentially there's things like the COVID assessment forms and working from homes and also vaccination registers that are being thrown up. And agencies are saying, well, how do we in fact manage these around it? Now, what we have put together for you, and this is where I'm going to say the resource pack for you comes, I'm going to say, alive for you to access. Essentially, if we use Rumbalara's, this is a true case study of an agency that's used the compliance dashboard that we're talking about, and yourselves have access to this information around it. We've got the policies in the Gemba Docs section. We've got areas, for example, with the pandemic forms as well too that you have access to, which I'll actually walk you through shortly. And this gives you a set of resources that you can actually readily access as well. Now, when we go into it as well, and if I just bring this back, thank you very much, here we go here, you'll find that you've also got the COVIDSafe plan. And when we talk about the COVIDSafe plan, I'm going to actually unpack the roadmap for you that's relevant for your agency and how that works. The same thing can go through, and this is what we've seen with agencies around some of their key policies that they've actually used. And we've seen this from a community service point of view, when we look at the legals, I'll call it the general legals around this, and people have said, well, what are some of the policies that we need to have? Well, here are some of the policies that a lot of agencies have actually covered as part of their general COVID list. And I'll show you what some of these look like as well. Similarly, Women's Housing, which is a different agency, and I shout out to Lena Tompkinson there, who's the compliance officer, Judy Line, and also Lindy Parker, the operations officer, operations manager, again, have done the same thing. They've had their COVIDSafe plan in terms of what information they've got. They've got their assessment forms that staff complete and fill out. And they've then got their checklist that they use to report back to the government agencies on. And we've opened this up to give you a single seat so you can actually view this information within your dashboard. Now let's just jump in, because this is where we're leading to, and we're going to build on this even next week from here. And this is some real case studies of what agencies have done. Now, you will get access to your login details, which I'll walk you through. This is actually managed. You can access this via our own Kaizen law firm website. You can click on to log into Gemba. It'll take you to this big blue button here. Your details will be emailed across to you, and you'll get access to your single seat dashboard. And this is a compliance dashboard that has been set up well over the last 10 years, and agencies are using it. Now let's have a look at some of these areas that you need to follow. So as part of this, agencies have said, what are some of the policies that our agencies need to have? Well, under the Gemba Docs section, you've got access to these policies. If you click on this and you and I can see there's some questions coming through, each agency has its own login. So you as an attendee will get access to these resources. If I type in the word COVID in the top right-hand corner up here and click on search, here it is. I've got a list of template policies that you can start to use. Now, the template policies include things like COVID controls checklist, which we'll come to. And if I open these up, for example, here we are here. It is actually Word documents, so we're not actually linking these up. Here it is here. And as part of this, you can have access to some of these checklist tools that you've got as well. Equally, if you wanted to have a look at vaccination policies as well too, we've got things like those listed on here, which we started to send out last week as well. And the vaccination policies also can be viewed as well under this section here. And you've got access to these to actually essentially set you up very quickly, and you can start to use these as well. And you can search for any of these policies throughout it. And as I said, you can get to those by simply going onto the Gemba dashboard, which you can view here. Now, the other parts that we're going to jump into is the COVID-safe plans and roadmaps. And this is something we wanted to look at today. So let's jump into the checklist. Now, all I've gone into is the disaster section, and we can open these up into projects. And your space that you've got is that we've had agencies using this since February last year around it, and you'll see that one of these says roadmaps that you can use. When we open this up, what we've then got is a list of items. Now, these items here essentially cover off the activities that your agency needs to follow. We have seen this work, and the reason that we've set this up in this way is that as the legislation changes within your state and territory area, whether you're based in Victoria or Queensland or WA, and I'm just picking furthest points as well, essentially these will change depending on what your agency's profile is. Remember I said that we've got sections, and if I just bring this back, I want to show you where we are heading with this as well too with our slides. So remember I said that we've got essentially section A, or phase A, phase B, and phase C and D. So we've got, if we look at our roadmaps, we've got phase A, phase B, phase C, phase D, and these aligning, if we pick out, and I'm just using two examples here of the Victorian roadmap on the bottom left-hand corner and the Queensland roadmap on the bottom right-hand corner here. And both of those have 4 different stages, 4 different dates that are attached to each of those as well. Now, what we have done and what has really worked well for agencies from a planning compliance point of view If we jump back, and let me just make this bigger for you, you'll see that down the bottom, we've got phase B, phase C, and phase D. And this, for example, is just designed as a case study for religious groups and ceremonies. Now, one of the questions that agencies ask us time and time again is when can we open services and what do we do around this? So essentially what we've done is take apart the roadmaps, and what works for agencies is to go, right, let's have a look at the short areas that you need to follow, which is all this section here. And this includes things like looking at your risk assessments, pandemic reports for your committees, work health and safety, COVID marshals that you need to have, vaccinations that you need to follow, when you can return to work. Is there a percentage around this as well too? And also from this, when can we advise clients of lockdowns as well too? Each one of these has specific activities that come out of that. So when we go in and I open this up, it accordions up to give me the details of what we need within this. So where we have seen this is that based on what services your agency delivers is what your roadmap will follow based on your assigned requirement. Now, we've just got a question from Franca, and I'll just shout out to Franca around this. And I can see Astrid has also asked a question, which is great. Franca's just asked, I have a question. For example, in Victoria, a mandate is not legislation. What is the litigious concern for an organisation if we implement policies as it contravenes federal law? I ask these questions because my team have asked me. Great question, Franca, around this. So essentially, remember, your policies is your internal policy documents that are there. We've actually utilized the policy documents and included things like work health and safety obligations. We've looked at fair work, even the mandatory vaccination position that I'm going to say has been broadened in Victoria for approved or authorized providers. Again, all of those is actually specific legislative requirements under the public health laws. What we've done here and the documents that I've sent you are templates around those. So you've got access to templates that your agency can adopt around those as well too. And it allows you to very quickly get these measures up for agencies. I will add, as you point out, that these will change over time as well too. And again, that's why we've actually run this as a web-based compliance dashboard, because it gives us the ability to quickly, as we run these webinars, to get this information out to attendees rather than, and it's also got version control on it. So essentially, when you're running these, and if I open this up, let me have a look at this, you'll find that we've also got version controls that sit around any of these. And if I search for a COVID policy, I can then look at the different archive logs that we've got. So as we load these up, you'll find that the different versions of these will then appear as well. Astrid has just asked, for charities who operate as approved venues for volunteers under Centrelink policy, is it Centrelink who are responsible for ensuring volunteers meet regulations, or is it the charity? Let me just repeat that question for agencies that are joining us. Astrid has just asked, for charities who operate as approved venues for volunteers under Centrelink policy, is it Centrelink who are responsible for ensuring volunteers meet regulations, or the charity? Look, I guess from a, if you're an approved venue for volunteers, even if it is under a Centrelink policy, still there's the obligation that you'll need to cover that off for your own charity as an independent agency as well too, Astrid. So what we do have around this, and I'll bring this up, and it's a really good question. What we've actually got within this here is a series of checklist tools for you. And again, it is around things like the work health assessment space as well. And if I open these up, for example, there are things like the workplace assessment checklist, which you can find under the document section. And if I bring these up, These are updated, for example, by, let me have a look, by WorkSafe around the documents that you need to follow as well too for approved venues, but also as well there are screening tools that your agency may need to follow in terms of for venues. And if I bring that up, just going back to the dashboard as well too, you'll find that there is essentially the checklist tools that we can see on the left hand side that covers also venues that you need to follow as well too, as part of that, as actually part of that process as well too. We're finding that agencies are actually, and even I'll add to Astrid's question around this and also Franca's question, one of the things that we are now seeing agencies asking for is indemnity cover and who's responsible for what based on this as well too. So essentially where things are, agencies are looking at, well, whose responsibility is this and when? So what we're seeing from a work health and safety point of view as well too is this issue of agencies saying, well, what is reasonable and how can we limit our liability and responsibility around this? So essentially this is where we've taken apart the roadmaps for you and essentially started to look at, well, what is phase B, phase C, what is the services that you can deliver under these sections, and what is your responsibilities? So essentially dividing these up into a number of, and you can see we've got the ID numbers listed here, of essentially a checklist tool based on what each state has given you as part of its own directive as well. Frank has just come up and also just asked just a question around the Health and Wellbeing Act and writers from the Chief Health Officer. I spoke to a lawyer last night about this. I'm concerned about the ramifications of the company. With it, essentially, with that, Franca, there are a number of competing laws around this, and I take your point as well too. What we're doing here is actually bringing those together for you. So, and bringing those together for you under a specific check, be that a policy position or a checklist position as well too, so that your agency can meet its legal compliance obligations as well too, and also work through each of these areas. Now, what I will add, and raising Franca's concerns around legal disputes around this, we've seen this work with agencies since the start of this pandemic, and essentially having their COVIDSafe plans of when you do things and when. So each of these activities that you can see here, for example, the workplace assessment, nominating your COVID marshals for your sites, all of these things we've run webinars for over the past 12 months around each of these. But essentially what this tool gives you is the roadmap summarized down into each of your specific areas. When we look at these as well too, we've also included things like vaccination registers as well. Now, last week we spoke about the vaccination registers for agencies. And when we talk of vaccination registers, what we're seeing around this, oops, here we go here, and I'll just log back in again. So within this, where we are seeing this, here it is here, thank you, is agencies asking us on questions of, and again, we're not going to move into the anti-vax debates around this, but this is around documenting information that your agency may need to hold both for volunteers, and we can see we've got the volunteers registers for employees and even members as well. Now, there's a lot of cases that are currently going on at the moment around Australia. We're seeing one this morning in Victoria for an injunction around mandatory vaccinations directives made by the Chief Health Officer. We're also seeing ones in New South Wales and the likes as well too. What this vaccination register that we're talking about, and I'm going to say, is to involve staff in this as well. Now, while there might be directives coming out of aged care, approved providers, hotel quarantine staff and the likes, what the chief health officers in different states have required is for people to either be no jab, no job is generally what the policy position is for specific areas. From a discrimination point of view, and there are a range of exemptions that people can have as part of their directives. Now, if we follow this through, what we've suggested here is to allow people to actually ask, and agencies to ask for information on a person's vaccination status. And the reason that we're asking that question, and I'm sure there'll be some questions around this, is around ensuring that you can, as your agency can provide, especially in the community services space, for religious groups, for refugee services, for community health services, for women's support networks, Aboriginal community controlled organisations, is to support the staff members in delivering safe and effective services. Now, prior to COVID, we've had these systems in place where you might have screened people for pre-existing medical conditions, and you've had systems in place to support that staff member in the workplace itself. So what we've put up here is the same process where you can actually add attachments directly in. It asks people the questions on when they've had their vaccine jab. It can actually record, if that's what you want to do, the information that you've got as well too. And under Fair Work, we saw that last week, where if it is reasonable, you can actually ask for people to supply their vaccination information. And that way you can actually then essentially, I'll show you here, upload it, and it's stored for your agency to actually use as well too. And you can see that. Now, the other part that we've also placed in there is, remember, we've also said, well, there are some exemptions that may apply. So if there is an exemption, and we can say, I spoke to the staff member and an exemption applies where they have a medical condition. Okay, so we place that into here. What we've then had is the note of what we've actually done around this, and also the discussion that's actually occurred. When we go back to our roadmap plan, and I'm going to jump back to here, then we can actually mark in that we've actually gone through and actually adjusted and met with staff around their vaccination policy and also what their information is. And we can actually go in and mark that into this register. So you can see this checklist tool that we've got here meets your legal compliance obligations from your roadmap. It gives you a single source of information that you can start to use today and actually run this out for your agency. Now, I can see also people are asking, in terms of first jab and second jab, how do we record that? Well, quite simply on here, what we can do, and we've just simply loaded it in here, and here it is here, we can actually add a person's vaccination status, or people can actually add it themselves under the volunteer progress. This is web-based, so it allows you to do it, and you can actually record the information that's listed here. And it will actually send people out reminders to allow this to happen, and it's going under their HR space. So you can see what we've got here is the roadmap that we've incorporated. We've got the checklists for the tools in covering the roadmap, and importantly, what you've also got is the risk register that agencies are then using. And we've seen Safe Work start to use this tool as well too for agencies when they've come in to do their audits. And again, these are three of the biggest items that we've seen from the roadmaps that agencies are struggling with. And so to help you, we've actually loaded those in for your dashboard to view it. And you can actually start using this today to get you up and running across it. Now, with it, essentially what we've got here is the roadmaps, we've got the tools, we've got your legal compliance obligations, all being met under this space as well. One other things that agencies have asked us for, which is around the staff training. And again, you've got access to all the staff training, specifically around your COVID safety obligations and the resources there as well too. I will add that we've had, for those of you that do run nurses and medical practitioners within your agency as well too, there are training tools on here that essentially do give you access to all the past COVID webinars as well too that we've run, and there's a lot more resources that are also listed on here as well too, and people can actually get their what we call CPD points for actually doing it. And they're just viewing the resources and the information that you can see across this as well too. So you're able to very, very quickly view this information, and you've got the details that are listed here, and here we are here around those. And again, we can see that these actually work. So this is not something that we're just saying, here, look, try this out and good luck. We're seeing that it covers off your legal compliance obligation, the roadmap specifically under the disaster space. You can view your projects, you can go into your roadmaps, you can add in notes around this stuff, and it'll actually give you the phase B, phase C, phase D, and we've got the dates listed here based on when it's actually coming up, and you can run these out as your checklist tools. We've just got some questions around this for agencies saying, can we run a board report on this? Absolutely. You can simply click on the board report, and what comes up here on the right-hand side down the bottom is essentially printed out to PDF, and you can run your board reports out for you to view as well too. And it gives you this information very, very quickly to actually view, and here it is here. So you can see that essentially I'm running out my reports for agencies to view this. So with it, as we go through the COVID roadmaps, you'll find that the need for the resources will be incredibly busy around your compliance work. We're seeing this within agencies in terms of what they need to meet and when as well too. And I'm just jumping back to the specific roadmaps. Here we are here. You'll find that as phase B, phase C, phase D starts to roll out, then we are moving very quickly in terms of meeting your legal compliance obligations. It doesn't matter which state you're actually based in. We've seen this work across the board with many other community service organizations and the likes, and it is something that works very, very quickly for agencies. As part of this, we're suggesting that you jump in, you have a look at the policy templates that are located in your Gemba dashboard. We will be sending the login details for a single seat for yourselves to be able to access these. You can look at your vaccination policies and vaccination registers. We suggest that you have a look at those. If you do have any questions, please contact us directly on my mobile number, which is listed here, or directly on 1300 360 360. If you have any other questions, by all means, please email us at support@gemba360.com. We will open up the phone lines and chat lines to answer any questions. If you are watching this recording after today's live session, please email us or give us a call on these numbers and contact details listed here.